Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. My name is Katie Williams, and I am in the Division of Data, Assessment, and Research. And I am here today to talk to you about the 2015-16 PARCC and MSAA verification. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to enter them into the question box. There will be time to ask and have questions answered at the end, but I'll also try to stop periodically throughout the webinar to answer any questions you have while it's relevant. Also, just so you know, today's webinar is being recorded and we are publishing it on the AUSSIE website, and the link where the webinar will be published in the recording will be available at the end of the slide deck. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Today, we're going to quickly review the participation verification timeline, then review the verification expectations, review the instructions, the expected student population, the accountability and participation reporting rules, which appeals are acceptable and not acceptable, and then where to go for additional support. And then, as I said, there will be time at the end if you have any questions. Jumping right into the reporting timeline, the very first item on the reporting timeline was actually the demographic verification and appeals window, and that took place in May and June. And now that we have the score data, we are in the second round of verifications. And the first verification window is the PARCC participation verification window. And that started yesterday when the data was sent to LEAs, the preliminary student, school, and LEA level PARCC participation and score data through the AUSSIE Secure website. And all appeals are due on July 25th for the PARCC data. And then the second verification window is the MSAA participation verification window. The data for the MSAA, the preliminary MSAA data will be sent out on July 27th. In the same way, LEAs will receive a preliminary student, school, and LEA level file that has the score and participation results, and that'll be received through the AUSSIE Secure website. And then all appeals are due back on August 1st at 5 p.m. And for those of you who aren't aware, the MSAA is DC's alternate assessment for ELA in math. Please note that because of further updates from vendors, we were able to include all PARCC data in the first verification window. So this means that the PARCC verification window includes the integrated Math 2 results as well as the results of students who took the assessment on paper and pencil. Please note that the preliminary data are embargoed and are not to be shared with anyone. And I just want to make a note that while the staggered review window is not ideal, and we are sorry that it has to be done in 2 periods of time, this was due to staggered receipt of the data from the testing vendors. And so we wanted to make sure to get you the PARCC data as quickly as possible. And so that's why we pushed that window up, even though we don't yet have the MSAA data. So after the participation verification windows, AUSSIE will review all appeals and publish official school, LEA, and student level PARCC and MSAA data for the LEAs the week of August 22nd. Again, when the final data are reported to LEAs, it will be reported through the AUSSIE Secure website, and it will be embargoed until the public release of the data, which is set to occur in late August. When the data are released publicly, they'll be released on the AUSSIE website, and the release will include participation rates this year. And then finally, in early September, AUSSIE will send out 2 copies of individual student reports to the schools for students who tested for PARCC and MSAA in the spring of 2016. So before I proceed, are there any questions about the reporting timeline as it currently stands? So right now we are in the review of the PARCC participation verification. All data has been sent to LEAs as of yesterday, and you should have accessed by this point in time, accessed the data and downloaded it. And I'll get more into more detail about that now. So during the participation verification, OSSI is asking if this verification provides LEAs with an opportunity to review and appeal information that impacts the 2015-16 school year official assessment results and participation rates for the PARCC and the MSAA assessments in ELA and math. Again, there are two separate verification windows, and now the first verification window includes all PARCC results, including integrated math 2 and paper and pencil. The second verification window is for the MSAA. This expected student population, which we'll go into more detail about, includes all students in grades 3 through 8 and all students in high school who took a required course for the first time in 2015-16. Now going into the instructions for verifying the data. As I mentioned, by this point you should have downloaded the data. The data are located on the OSSI Secure website under the Assessment folder. Now this is following a new structure, and I'm actually going to pivot over and show you that new structure in just 1 minute. But first I want to talk about the permissions for the Secure website. The permissions for this folder have only been shared with each head of LEA per the OSSI LEA contact list. It is the head of LEA's responsibility to share those credentials within the LEA with anyone who the head of LEA wishes to have permission to access the data. OSSI is not going to email the secure login credentials to anyone else within the LEA. It is the head of LEA's responsibility, again, to share the credentials at their discretion with anyone within the LEA. So now going over to the secure upload site, I want to show you exactly where under the new file structure, the new folder structure, you can access the data. So once you log into the upload site, you scroll down. If you are a charter school, a charter LEA, you scroll down to the folder called Public Charter Schools, and you click on that. Now within that folder, you'll see all the LEAs listed. You find your LEA and you click on that. Within that folder, you'll find an assessment subfolder. You click on the assessment subfolder. And then within the assessment subfolder, you'll find the data file that was uploaded for your LEA yesterday. Again, we're using a new folder structure, and the data are not loaded under the same structure that they've been loaded in the past. If you need additional information about how to access the file, or if you're having difficulty, please feel free to reach out to Tanya Lovelace. Her email is listed in underneath at the very bottom of the slide here, and it will be also available at the end. So that is the very first thing you need to make sure you're able to do. Download the data, and this needs to be done immediately if you haven't already. Then once you're in the data, the action is to review and verify the data for accuracy, completeness, and validity. you feel that the data are accurate, complete, and valid, no further action is needed. If, on the other hand, you want to appeal the data, you need to complete steps 3 and 4. For step 3, to appeal any data, you would complete columns A through C in the Student Level Data tab. Correct the incorrect data in the file, and gather the supporting documentation needed as proof for your appeal. And then step 4, upload the appealed data file and supporting documentation to that same folder where we provided the data on the secure upload site, and email me, Katie Williams, to confirm your submission. Again, all appeals are due on July 25th at 5 p.m. for PARCC and on August 1st at 5 p.m. for the MSAA results. Please use the following naming convention when submitting your data file. Your LEA name, then an underscore, SY1516, underscore PARCC, underscore appeals, underscore, and then the version number if you've submitted multiple versions, underscore, and then the date of your submission. I'm going to pause and see if anyone has any questions at this time about the instructions and expectations for conducting the verification. Okay, seeing no questions. Oh, one just came in. A question here, will there be a similar process for the DC-CAS Science Alt? Yes, I do anticipate there will be a similar process, although we haven't gotten there yet, but I do anticipate there will be a similar review process. And then another question, is there a field instructions packet to explain how to fill out columns A through C? Yes, to answer that question, in the verification guidance, which is published on the AUSSIE website, on the assessment page, there are instructions about how to fill out each data field, and for the data fields that are populated, what each of the permitted values means. And actually, I have the template open, and I can just show you quickly. There's also a data dictionary, and it explains what each data field means. So appealed, you should fill that out with a yes if you're appealing, or leave it blank otherwise. The data fields being appealed lists each data being appealed, and then the reason for appeal. Those are columns A through C. Definitely read the guidance for more information, but there is guidance on how to fill out those data fields. Okay, another question. Oop, sorry, going back here. Okay, we didn't receive login information for the secure upload site. The login information was sent to the head of LEA per the AUSSIE contact list. If you have any concerns, if it wasn't received by the head of LEA, please email Tanya Lovelace at dc.gov. Again, the data manager, the assessment coordinator would not have received this email. It only went to the head of LEA. It's up to the head of LEA's discretion to share the credentials to any other individuals who need access within the LEA. AUSSIE is not going to share those credentials. Another question, should our data file have contained the science assessment data? No, we do not have science assessment data available yet, just the math and ELA. This data file just includes the PARCC data at this time, as that's the only data available. We do not have a set date for when the science data will be available, as we do not know exactly when we'll be receiving it from the vendor, is my most current understanding. Okay, I'm going to move on here. So going into more detail into the expected student population, for grades 3 through 8, all students in grades 3 through 8 are expected to take a required statewide math and ELA assessment each year. In high school, all students must take a required statewide assessment in ELA and math once in high school. The expected high school test population is all students who took a required course for the first time in 2015-16. DC's required high school assessments are Geometry or Integrated Math 2 for math and ELA 2 for ELA, with the following exceptions. Students who took the required high school course and PARCC assessments in 2014-15 and then repeated the course again in 2015-16 would not be expected to be in the tested population in 2015-16. Students who took the geometry course and PARCC assessment in middle school in 2014-15 are expected to take the Algebra 2, not just in 14-15, this is in general. If a student took the required geometry course and PARCC assessment in middle school, that student must take the Algebra 2 assessment as their required statewide high school assessment. And then finally, students who are still in high school who previously took the 10th grade DC CAS math and ELA assessments are not expected in the tested population. Any questions about the tested population? Okay, moving on. In the next two sections, I'm going to cover the accountability reporting rules and the participation reporting rules. And these are for the purposes of showing you how to get from your student level data tab to the school and LEA data tabs, which aggregate the student level data according to certain business rules for reporting. So in the left-hand column here, you can see the business rules, and in the right-hand column, it shows you how, with the data fields in your file and the student level data, you can accomplish and replicate the school and LEA level aggregations. So I'll go over each now. So the accountability reporting rules, students must meet all of the criteria 1 through 5 to be included for accountability reporting. Students must be enrolled for the full academic year, and that means that they must be enrolled on the date of the enrollment audit, October 5th, 2015, on March 28th, 2016, which was the first day of PARCC testing, and close to the FAY dates in past years for comparability, and then 85% of the time in between those dates. Again, this is about enrollment, not attendance. The student must be enrolled for 85% of the time in between those dates. So if you look, the way that plays out in the data, there's a full academic year column, and it will be school, LEA, state, or none. So if a student is listed as having a full academic year of school, that means that they're eligible to be included at the school, LEA, and state level for reporting. That means that the student was enrolled at the same school at the time of the enrollment audit on March 28th and for 85% of the time in between. Similarly, if the full academic year field says LEA, that means that the student wasn't enrolled at the same school for all 3 of those points, but they were enrolled at the same LEA at the time of the audit on March 28th and 85% of the days in between. And finally, the state level, that means that the student would be included for state level reporting, but not for the LEA or school level. And that means that the student wasn't enrolled at the same school or LEA for those 3 points of time or 3 criteria, but we're enrolled in a DC school for all 3, and so they get counted for the state. And then the final group is none, and those students don't get included for any reporting, for the accountability reporting. Criteria number 2 is that only valid scores are included. And the way that looks in the data is there's a field called summative score status, one for math and one for ELA, and that has to be equal to valid score. Now please note there are students who earned a score, but their scores have been invalidated, and that would say invalidated score. If a student has an invalidated score, that means that they took an off-grade test, and so their score is not considered valid. What that means is that a student took an assessment for a grade other than the one that they were enrolled. So a 3rd grader took a 4th grade math test. That score would be invalidated because 3rd graders are expected to take the 3rd grade math test. Number 3, recently arrived limited English proficient or ELL students who enrolled in U.S. schools for the first time within the past 12 months are not included in accountability reporting. In the data to identify who those students are, those are the students where new to U.S. equals yes and ELL, LEP equals yes. Those students are excluded from accountability reporting. Number 4, students who take optional high school assessments are not counted for reporting. So looking at how that looks in the data, we would exclude all records where registered for required ELA or math test is blank. I'm sorry, we would include all records. This is right. Exclude records where the registered for required math or ELA assessment is blank. And then number 5, high school students who previously took either the 10th grade DC CAS assessment or a required high school PARCC or MSAA assessment in 2014-15 are not included. And so that means we would exclude students where the previously took required high school math or ELA assessment is equal to yes. I see a few questions coming in, so I'm going to pause just right after this last section. So just for awareness, for the ELL, LEP subgroup and the special education subgroup reporting, students who exited ELL or SPED status within the past 2 years are included in performance reporting for that subgroup. And then the minimum reportable number of students in a school or subgroup is 25. I'm going to pause for questions. Okay, non-public placement students are considered FAY at the LEA level, not the school level. That's correct. Non-publicly placed students, even if they were enrolled at the same non-public school and attending the same non-public school for all 3 of those points of time, they would be counted as an LEA level full academic year. Great clarifying point there. And then just to repeat what I said about the invalidated scores, scores would be invalidated if a student took an off-grade test, and that means that the student was enrolled in a grade and took an assessment associated with or required for another grade level. There weren't many cases of that, but if you want to go to the student level data and identify who those students are, I'll show you where that is. There's a data, well, there's one for ELA and one for math, but there's a data field that shows math off-grade test and then an ELA off-grade test. If that says is equal to yes, that means the student was identified as having taken an assessment in a grade that they should not have taken it. I hope that answers the question. Okay. About the exiting ELL students, does that mean that if they exited the ELL group in the past year, their score won't be included? No, what this means is that, in fact, if a student exited ELL status in 2014-15, that they're still being monitored to ensure that those students' academic progress is on grade level, and students who are being monitored as an ELL student, their scores are included in the ELL subgroup. Okay, getting more questions here, so just give me 1 minute. Going back to another point. Should we expect to see only students who meet these requirements, these business rules on our roster, or will we see every student who registered and or tested? Great question. You will see all students who are being associated with your LEA for accountability, not just those who meet the requirements for these business rules. The flags of these business rules, or the values calculated for these different fields, are what determine who gets counted in the school and LEA level results that will be used for reporting. And then another question, students who previously took the required high school math or ELA assessment. Students with a valid score but have been flagged yes will not be counted for the aggregations. That is correct. If a student was flagged as yes as having taken a required test in the past in high school, even if they have a valid score, they will not be included for reporting. Okay, I'm going to keep going here and move on to the participation reporting rules, which are different than the accountability reporting rules. Oh, just saw another question come in. So the question was, with the invalidated scores, what if a student grade is incorrect in the data? Would we be allowed to change that grade for validation? Will that change the validation status? So I'm going to go into what the acceptable appeals are in just a little bit, but to answer your question, this is something you should flag for us. However, the grade level data has already gone through a verification process, and that was during the demographic and enrollment verification in May and June. So we're not anticipating that any students' grade levels are incorrect. Now going into the participation reporting rules. This is set up in the same way. The business rules used for the school and LEA and state level reporting are provided on the left, and how that looks in the student level data, if you want to aggregate from the student level to replicate the rates, is provided in the right-hand column. So the first thing, students must meet all of the eligibility criteria in order to be considered eligible for inclusion in participation reporting. So students must be continuously enrolled throughout the testing window. And in 2015-16, the testing window was from March 28th to May 20th. How that looks in the data, students must be the continuously enrolled during the testing window data field needs to be equal to yes. And high school students must be registered for required high school assessment. So we would expect the registered for a required high school math or ELA assessment to be equal to yes. Additionally, high school students who previously took either the 10th grade DC-CAS assessment or a required high school PARCC or MSAA assessment in 2014-15 are not included. So previously took required high school math or ELA assessment should be blank. And finally, students with an OSCE approved medical exemption will not be included. So the medical exemption field must be set to no. If all four of the criteria listed here are met, then the student is eligible for inclusion in participation reporting. Then, to determine whether a student gets counted as a participant or a non-participant, students must meet the following two rules. All eligibility criteria must be met, number one, so math or ELA eligible participant should be equal to yes, and the student must have a valid summative score. So students who earn a valid summative score will be counted as participants, and then all others who are eligible will be counted as non-participants. If a student was not eligible for participation, in the participant field, the value will be set to NA, as in not applicable, because the student wasn't even eligible. And then two additional points here. For ELA, for recently arrived ELL students who enrolled in U.S. schools within 12 months, these students are required to take the Access for ELL's assessment rather than, or in lieu of, the PARCC or MSAA ELA assessment. If these students who are new to the U.S. ELL students took the Access assessment, they'll be counted as participants. If the students who are new to the U.S. and ELL didn't take the PARCC and they didn't take, they need to take the Access. If they didn't take the Access assessment, they would be counted as non-participants. And then the minimum reportable number of students in a school or subgroup is 40. Question here, a student with FAY equal to school will count in our score aggregations, but if flagged no for continuously enrolled, he or she will not be included in our participation denominator. Is that right? That's correct. The criteria are different between the participation and the accountability reporting. Another question, to be eligible for participation, do they also have to be eligible for accountability, as listed on the previous slide? Nope, these are independent, and so a student doesn't have to be eligible for accountability to be counted in participation. Okay, moving on. In terms of acceptable appeals, LEAs may submit appeals only in situations where the LEA identifies an error in OSCE's calculations or the determination of one of the following data fields. 2015-16 Access for ELLs tested, full academic year status, continuously enrolled during the testing window, registered for a required ELA or math assessment, previously took the required high school math or ELA assessment, ELA or math off-grade test, or medical exemption. LEAs are not permitted to submit appeals to request changes to the following data fields. As I mentioned earlier, data fields that have previously been verified, and that includes all data fields that were pulled from the demographic and enrollment data verified during May and June. And then the score data is also not eligible for appeal. All test vendors have several levels of quality control to ensure scores are valid and reliable. And then to make a few additional points, OSCE in the case where the supporting documentation submitted does not meet the requirements and does not allow OSSI to approve the appeal, OSSI is not obligated to request additional information or follow-up information from the LEA. The burden is on the LEA to demonstrate that the appeal should be approved in the initial appeal window. And then finally, no late appeals will be accepted. The deadlines provided here and in the guidance are hard deadlines. So going back to the participation to answer a question, are students with medical exemptions excluded from the numerator and the denominator for participation? That's correct. In order to be counted in the denominator, you need to not have a medical exemption. And then the only students who get counted in the numerator as participants are those who were eligible, so we're in the denominator. And then a clarifying point, if gender is incorrect, we cannot appeal. That's correct. And just to wrap up here before I leave more time for questions that people may have, just so you know, all of the training materials, the slide deck, this recorded webinar, and the verification guidance document will be posted on the OSSI website under http://ossi.dc.gov/assessment. And then if you need assistance gaining access to the data, if you haven't already, and this should be an urgent priority if you haven't already gained access to the data, you should email Tanya Lovelace and your head of LEA to make sure that the data file has been pulled for your review. And then the one thing I did want to point out, because we've gotten some questions about this, is that in the data, we have subclaim data fields available, and some questions have come up about what the subclaims mean in terms of their descriptions. And in response to that inquiry, we're posting a mapping or like a legend that maps the subclaim for each grade level and subject to a description. And we're going to be posting that on the OSSI website with these other materials so you can easily pull that. But it's not, those mappings and the descriptions are not included to a deep level, in your LE8 files. So at this time, I'll go ahead and say thank you for being here, and if you have further questions, I'm happy to stay online and answer those. And if you have to run, thank you so much for your time, and please feel free to reach out during the verification window should you have any questions. Question, can we have a list of all the fields that can't be appealed? So that, because there are more data fields that can't be appealed, it's you have the list of data fields that can be appealed, and actually there may be some detail in the verification guide that in the data dictionary that says if the data field can be appealed or not. Let me just check that out. Oh, yep. In your student level file in the data dictionary, you can actually filter for the appealable fields. So eligible for appeal, yes, no, or not applicable, to be able to tell you which ones are appealable. And just actually to point out one more clarifying point, you're not able to appeal if a student is eligible for participation. However, by appealing the field continuously enrolled during the testing window, if that appeal is accepted, that will result in a change to the participant eligibility field, and OSSI will conduct that calculation. So you don't want to, and you're not allowed to appeal eligible participant, but you're allowed to and should appeal the component part or parts. and those will in turn impact the determination of participant eligibility or eligibility for reporting. Good question. If we have an appeal related to the calculated aggregations, how do we note that information? When you email, because the way the appeals are set up, or the appeal template, it's really just to appeal student level information. If you would like to or feel that something is incorrect in the calculation for accountability or participation, please include that information on the email confirmation to me when you submit your appeal. And actually, if you can flag that now, please do if you're seeing something there. Any other questions that anyone has that I can help answer? So who should you expect to be on your student roster? You would expect to see any student who was associated with your LEA, not just those who meet the eligibility criteria for score or participation reporting. Okay, I'm going to stay on the line, but I'm going to stop the recording, and thank you very much everyone for being here. If you have to sign off, go ahead, and I will just continue to stay on and answer any lingering questions that come in for about 10 more minutes. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for your time and engagement. Bye.